So hey, what's the first board game that springs to mind when I say the words Milton Bradley? Well, if you're like me, your answer might be Monopoly, but that's a Parker Brothers game later acquired by Hasbro, and now I have to turn in my knowledgeable gamer card. Those of you who did your homework might have answers like Scrabble, Yahtzee, The Game of Life, Jenga, or Battleship. Special shout out to anyone who answered Fireball Island or 13 Dead End Drive, I see you. The point I'm trying to make is that Milton Bradley typically stays in their lane with what kind of board games they publish. Light on rules, fairly luck-based, family-friendly games. And also Battleship. So what if I told you in 2003 Milton Bradley published a board game depicting a hyper-violent future sport? Well friends, allow me to introduce you to possibly the weirdest entry in Milton Bradley's back catalog, Battleball. Battleball is a competitive game where two players take control of opposing teams on an American football field. Your goal is pretty much the same as American football: take the ball and carry it into your opponent's end zone before the other team violently persuades you to reconsider your life choices. If you score twice before your opponent does, you win. Your team is comprised of 11 players, and each player has a specific position that determines their speed and strength. Running backs are super speedy but not great at tackling, whereas tackles, well, they tackle real good, as the name suggests, but aren't very mobile. At the start of the game, you and your opponent arrange your team behind your own 20-yard line in any formation you choose. Once everyone is satisfied with their setup, the ball is placed at midfield, a first player is randomly determined, and the game begins. On your turn, you pick a player and roll their associated die to determine how many spaces they move. These dice are what dictates the aforementioned speed and strength of each player, so the speedy running backs roll a 20-sided die, whereas tackles roll a 6-sider. If you move a player onto the same space as the ball, that player will automatically pick it up and carry it with them. If a player at any point moves into a space adjacent to an opposing player, they immediately stop and forfeit any additional spaces they would have moved that turn. At the end of movement, if two opposing players are adjacent to each other, a tackle is attempted. The two players roll the dice associated with their positions, and the player with the lower number wins. This means those slow 6-sided dice players have a decided advantage over the speedier players when it comes to winning tackle attempts. The player who loses the tackle is removed from the board and replaced with a Carnage token, which serves to block off that space from being moved onto in future turns. I'm going to pause the rules explanation here because I think we need to reflect on this for a moment. When a player gets tackled in this game, they are left prone on the field in a pile of stuff referred to as carnage. Milton Bradley, are you okay? Do you need to talk to someone? Seriously, this is the company that brought us Candyland, and now I'm here describing a board game with possibly dead football players where play continues even after they are reduced to carnage. No medical staff is checking up on them, their teammates aren't all that concerned, it's just play on, we got a game to win. So, like I said, hyper-violent future sport. There's also some optional rules for passing the ball, but I'm not going to say much about that other than it allows you to roll this football-shaped 6-sided die, which low-key might be the best component in the history of board games. Seriously, play with the passing rules, roll the football die, everybody wins. So, how is it? Well, despite me touting this as a very un-Milton Bradley-esque game, there's definitely some classic Milton Bradley mechanics woven into the design. I'm sure the mention of rolling dice to move dropped some monocles at the board game high society luncheon, and yeah, it certainly is a little frustrating when you elect to move one of your fast players and roll a 2 on a 20-sided die, but it's also kind of hilarious. Here we have one of the fastest runners in the entire sport exploding up the field to make a big play before he stops short a few feet later to contemplate his existence, I guess. The dice-based randomness carries over into the tackling as well. Those big burly tackles will likely win most of the altercations with smaller faster players, but every so often the small guy will come out on top. It's equal parts infuriating and silly, and if games that are prone to streaks of good or bad luck aren't your jam, then Battleball is definitely not for you. All that being said, if you're willing to take the dicey luck elements in stride, there's still a compelling element of strategy here. Choosing your starting formation presents some interesting options, and the early game before someone gets possession of the ball is a matter of setting up your players for an offensive strike and or covering any gaps in your defense. You can even ignore the ball entirely and focus on just trying to take out as many of your opponent's players as you can. Things get even more interesting when players start going down and carnage tokens start littering the field. I'm just never going to be okay with this. Somebody call it Doc! These obstacles will create different pathways or cut off sections of the field, creating a tactical puzzle that will often force players to change their plan of attack multiple times per game. Battleball is the game that introduced me to the term beer and pretzel game, which is said with admiration or derision depending on who you talk to and how they feel about pretzels. Those into tightly designed strategy games with minimal or non-existent random elements like dice aren't going to have much time for a game like Battleball. There's value in a game like this, however, a game that you can set up and explain pretty quickly and then just roll dice, make a few vaguely tactical decisions, and laugh at the somewhat random chaos that's unfolding before you. I had to look at the ratings for this game on BoardGameGeek before making this video, and I found it interesting that even people who rated Battleball a 3 or a 4 out of 10 said things like cool mechanics and silly football dice fest, which describes this game better in 5 words than I'd managed to do in 5 minutes. Alright, and the board for this game is really big. It's even advertised on the box lid like it's a selling point. I don't really have a commentary on this, it's just kind of a weird thing to highlight. So at the end of the video I would usually say something like, I recommend you play this game, or definitely launch this game into the sun, but I can't really do that here for a couple of reasons. First, Battleball has been out of print for a long time now, so even finding a copy of it is tricky. Secondly, whether or not you should play Battleball really depends on how you feel about games with lots of dice rolling, and how big your table is. For what it's worth, I had fun with Battleball even if I couldn't entirely attribute my success to my own strategic genius. But hey, I'll take almost any excuse to eat some pretzels.